episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show, bringing you another fascinating guest today, helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today we have the honor of being joined by Anita Hazenberg, who is Director of the Innovation Directorate at INTERPOL, also known as the International Criminal Police, which is an international organization that facilitates worldwide police cooperation and crime control. Headquartered in Lyon, France, it is the world's largest international police organization with 7 regional bureaus worldwide and a national central bureau in 195 member states. And Anita is speaking to us actually today from Singapore, where she leads various innovation initiatives at INTERPOL's global complex for innovation. With 3 master's degrees in public administration, social work, and a master's in change management, Anita started her career with over a decade in the state police of the Netherlands, in various policing functions, including patrol, vice, and detective work. She taught for over a decade at the Police Academy of the Netherlands, as well as held a role in the program manager of police and human rights at the Council of Europe before assuming her current role. She also served as Chief Superintendent and Coordinator International Strategic Alliances and Deployment at the National Police of the Netherlands. She was the former director of the European Network of Police Women and former conference director of the global law enforcement think tank Pearls in Policing. And we are honored to have her today. Anita Hazenberg, thank you so much for taking the time to come on our show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really honored. Let's have a nice discussion.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm looking forward to this. And, you know, I would love, as we typically do, to start off by passing you the microphone for a while, just to talk and introduce a little more about yourself. If you could take us on a little journey of everything from where you grew up, how you developed your interest in social work and public admin, and of course, policing, and a bit of that early career journey. I think that'd be a great way to start things off.
That's very nice. You know, my mom has still, I'm from a small village in the south of the Netherlands, and my mom has still drawings from when I was 3 years old. And the question on the drawing was, what will you be when you get old? And what I wrote down when I was a 3 years old girl was, I want to become a police officer. And that was my focus the rest of my young life. There was only one problem at that time. There was a height limit in policing. So you had to be 165 centimeters. And I was 164. So that was really, really an issue. And I remember the day that I had to go, and I was finally, you know, allowed to go to the interviews. And the first thing they did, they picked me up and said, how tall are you? And I know that I had been stretching like, really, I think the only time in my life I have been 165 was that moment. And that has made a big change in my life. I joined the police school, and ever since I've been proudly serving in uniform. The first 10 years on the street with my gun. The funny thing was that I was 17 when I started. And at that time, you had to be 18 to get a driving license. So imagine, the first year I was not driving the police car. I was not allowed because I didn't have a driving license. I was sitting next to my colleague, and we were patrolling the villages, and I served in the middle and the east of the Netherlands, and I really enjoyed it. I became, what I always said, quite quick, an adult, realizing that there are different dimensions in a society. In the small village where I grew up, everything was nice and peaceful, which was quite different when you start to work as a police officer, because then you see and you are close to what I always call the gutter of a society. And it is there that I already soon started to realize how the position of women was not that well organized in our societies. So we started to build the first platforms to look at incest or sexual abuse of women. And that's also, you asked about my degrees, that's why my passion came, to always look at the people who have less power in our societies. So it's either women in the area of sexual misuse, it's either even we started the discussions about the sexual harassment in law enforcement, which was at that time not very easy to discuss. with only having a few women in the force. We started later when I was asked to work for the Council of Europe and not an intergovernmental organization, not to be confused with the European Council, which is part of the European Union. No, the Council of Europe in Strasbourg is a human rights organization. And there I became the first police and human rights program director, setting up programs for law enforcement in the then 43 member countries in Europe to look more at how they could prevent human rights abuses. So what you see in my career is that I always have done something which is international and which is focusing on, you know, how can we help the ones with less voice? And it was at one of these occasions that I realized that policing itself does also not always have a strong voice. I mean, we see a lot, we hear a lot, but it's always, we are an executing organization. So it's the politics, it's the decision-making bodies who decide what we do and what we not do. But I think it's very important that we develop a strong sense of giving the right advice and giving the right experiences back to the people who make the decisions what policing should do, especially in my own country, the Netherlands, where I was a serving officer. And that is also what I call the emancipation of law enforcement. We have to develop a voice that we give a fair, honest reflection of what we experience of working in the gutter of a society. And it was then that I realized that we had to bring executives in law enforcement together to let them discuss what they see, what they experience, how we should prepare better for the future. And this was Pearls and Policing. Pearls are the good examples and the clever, forward-looking executives. We brought them globally together once a year. We developed an action learning plan. I was at that time director of the School for Police Leadership at the Police Academy in the Netherlands. And we really got it going. And again, I was in my international playground. The world is my village. And I am very proud that we developed to get executives talking about the future. And maybe that's why I was asked to apply for this position, a new position within Interpol, to establish an innovation center in Singapore. And that's 4 years ago now, and that's where we are. Back to you.
Anita, you know, I'm sitting right now, you're in Singapore, I'm sitting here on the East Coast of the United States in Philadelphia. I am familiar with the local police force, but I think like most people that would be listening and watching this show, my only exposure to even the term Interpol is from Hollywood. And there's always that classic scene in the crime movies that there's a arms dealer or a drug runner or something, they've escaped and we have to notify Interpol. But I don't really know about that. Not a lot of people know what that means. Take us on a little walk through exactly what Interpol is, a little bit of its history, and some of what you do on a daily basis at Interpol.
Interpol, and that's quite good you asked that, a little bit about its history. Interpol has a long history, and we are at the moment preparing for a 100-year anniversary, which will take place next year. So it's a long history. And I think the key of Interpol is not what you see in the films. Okay. Our daily work is totally different. Sure. Maybe disappointed, because many people think, oh, if you work for Interpol, you jump from helicopters, you come into houses all over the world with an arresting order. No, nothing at all. We are, and that's the key word of Interpol, it's about communication and support. And imagine, we have 195 member countries. That's quite a big, that's more than the United Nations. And in each of these countries, there's a national central bureau. We call it NCB. And we are the linking pin from our headquarters in Lyon, but as you said, also regional, 7 regional offices, and the Interpol Global Complex of Innovation in Singapore. We are connecting all the dots. So it's still true. If a crime occurs somewhere in a country and an arrest warrant is issued, then I-24/7, so we are 24/7 available in order to receive the information you have, your police force have, into our system, and then we try using 18 databases to help you arresting this criminal. That's one part, an important part of our work. Another important part is capacity building and training. Imagine how training of police officers take place in 195 countries. There's some differences, and we try to support, help, develop training. We have set up a global police academy where, you don't have to reinvent the wheel in developing training modules over and over again. You can reuse them, adapt them, and make more use of the limited capacities we have. That's one focus. Our operational capabilities, like even today, there's a country facing a certain crime, not able to deal with the right technical means, then they ask even the Innovation Center, can you help in looking at the more advanced digital forensic tools? Can you help us with that? We set up international coordinated operations. In the area of environment, we do a lot of work. In the environment of marine, drugs, human trafficking, international big actions together with other regional partners like Afripol, Europol, Ameripol, Asaniapol. We are the coordinating body globally. You have many regional police organizations, but we are the only really global working organization. Does that give a better picture?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned, the term innovation. The organization is known as the Interpol Innovation Directorate, where you are, or the Global Complex for Innovation. And you're very passionate, as we were talking about before the show, about the general theme of innovation in global policing. We're talking global now, not just regional police actions. Talk a little bit about what innovation in policing means. We talk a lot about innovation on the show in different areas, in biotechnology and information technology. What is, in general, innovation in global policing mean, and what are some of the areas and challenges that are most interesting to you in a 2022 world?
The reason I started to say to you, imagine that I started working in the police 40 years ago. At that time, I had a truncheon, a gun, and a radio like this big. And if we had to communicate secretly with our radio room, we had to drive the police car to the station to phone, because we didn't have, and you're smiling, but, and that's true, but it's good to remember that at that time, 40 years ago, policing did not have a mobile phone. That only started, I think, 15 years later when I joined. So where are we now? If you talk about nano, if we talk about artificial intelligence, if we talk about deepfakes, if we talk about digital forensics, if we talk about the whole aspect of digitalization, then we have to realize, serving 195 member countries, that if you work for an Interpol Innovation Center, that certain countries in the world have another demand to my office than other countries. There are countries which are more developed, countries less developed, but all would like to be served by the Interpol Innovation Center. And that's a big challenge we in the team experience. So we have to indeed sometimes, so it was very special, and that was an eye-opener for me, that one representative of a member country said to me, Anita, our crime unit in my country does not even have computers. So whatever you can do is already very helpful for me. While other countries are saying, yeah, what do you think are the newest developments in the area of artificial intelligence? How is this going to change law enforcement. So for us, we took a quite principled approach that we always look at innovation and at new technologies from a tool, a threat, and an evidence perspective.
Okay.
Let me use an example.
Please.
You know, a drone can be a threat because criminals can put chemicals, spread it over an Olympic stadium, and we have a big disaster. A drone as a threat. But the drone can also be a tool. Look at a place of a crime where you will never have a very quick overview by not using a drone. So it's a very effective tool if it's properly used by policing. And the third aspect, the evidence side, which is often forgotten, is that the drone contains data. So we, for example, in the Innovation Center developed guidelines for first responders who arrive at the place of a crime. They find a drone and often they disconnect it, not realizing that there can be useful data on that drone. So we try to help them with creating awareness of these new technologies, as well as helping them in, hey, in this member country, there's a huge development, or they have developed a tool which can be really helpful for you. Why don't you combine the two? And our role is, again, connecting, because we see each other, we see ourselves in the Interpol Global Innovation Center as the thought leader. We try to bring the new elements on the agenda of the 195 countries. We are the global connector, as I just mentioned. We see that country A has developed something. We see that country Z has a need. Why don't we connect them? And we try to find in that way the innovative solutions to make policing more efficient to solve crime. How does that sound?
It sounds great, and I'm sitting here thinking, if I am the chief of police of country X, and I have an issue, whether that issue has to do with drones or robotics or whatever, you have several interesting programs with really cool names, actually: Technology Gym, Innovation Radar, Global Horizon Scan. What do I, as the head of police of country X, do I come to visit you in Singapore, and are there workshops? How would we work together if I was the head of police and I want to learn about the future of quantum and neurotechnology in your organization? What happens?
Yeah, first you of course have to contact us, and then you will find out that more or less every week we organize a virtual discussion or training room.
Okay.
Meaning that we take all these new technologies or issues which are relevant for your law enforcement chief, and I speak to you now as the chief, that I say, you have to come and listen. You have to come and listen and see how your police organization is changing and find out what other law enforcement agencies are already doing. So that's one part. Come and join us every week and at one of our sessions. One of these sessions is about global horizon scanning, because what I have experienced in my 40 years of policing, and I've told you how much I love my profession, but I also can be critical about my profession. And what I see is that we are super good in being responsive. There is a crime, there's a big crisis, the police joins and tries to solve the situation. That's how we are trained. And we are super, super good in it. However, we are less good in being prepared for what we still don't know what's going to come. If you compare it with the army prepares for the wars they hope will never happen. Mm-hmm. That's not what policing is doing. Policing is preparing for, yes, there are first response trainings, but it's always often about the unknown. Because we are always the one first on the spot. Mm-hmm. And then we have to react with what we have and how the situation is. So I would invite you, Chief, to come and listen with us and work with us in future scanning, global horizon scanning. What is it? What are the soft signals? What are the weak symptoms you could already identify to be better prepared. And what we do is we bring the chief innovation officers, we bring senior advisors globally together to find out, what do you hear? And it's quite amazing that we then really can pick up trends which are relevant for you, Chief, to start preparing, because you can never prepare for everything, because the world is changing so fast. Mm-hmm. And due to new technologies, it goes in a speed which we had never anticipated on. So I would like you to come and participate in sharing what your experiences in your area, but also listen what's happening in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Europe, and to bring this together to be better prepared globally. That's also what I want you to do. I want you to bring in, and that's the radar, because if you have new developments and you have used a lot of funding and a lot of time to develop something that makes your policing more efficient, I would like you to bring it to the global table, the Interpol table, where we can share it. And you should allow us to share it with others. And that's the radar idea. Mm-hmm. You know, where are the new developments, the new tools, which we could use already for law enforcement? That is really relevant. And in that way, and if you need help, if you say, I have a crime case which I cannot solve, do you know, Anita and the innovation team, does Interpol be able to help us somewhere with support of someone else in the world to help us solving this crime? That's at least how I hope that you would come and make use of us in the most efficient way.
Speaking about those new tools, we do a lot of episodes with small startup companies or university laboratories, whether they're working in biotechnology or quantum computing or some of these cutting edge areas. Is crime tech a segment that is burgeoning? Is it something that, in other words, is there an ecosystem out there that you see developing, whether it's at universities or small startup companies, that is specifically focused on crime-centric technologies that throughout your scanning of the horizon, that you're actively looking at, what the newest and best thing is, because you've got to stay ahead of the criminals that are also thinking about these horrible uses of these tools. Are you doing a lot of scanning of the startup ecosystem for new technologies?
I have a little bit different experience.
Okay.
And it's a little bit sad experience, actually. Mm. I'm bombarded every day. I could do a day job by all companies writing to the Interpol Innovation Center and saying, look what I have. Wouldn't this be fantastic? And what we experience in the Innovation Center is that many of either the startups or the big companies have, and now I make it a little bit ridiculous sounding, but just to make my point, is they have never spoken to a police officer. They have never really understood policing. So we organize sessions, for example, Interpol World, in which we are strongly focusing on bringing the business and the policing world together, and the academic world. Let's not forget them. Mm-hmm. And it was at one of these sessions that a provider of new tools, telling the police that he had a fantastic tool developed, at the end of the session said, this was the first time I spoke to the police. And this is really something I see as a problem. Tools are developed without knowing your target group, means that we get tools which are very expensive because they have cost a lot of developing time and energy, and which are not really fitting. So what I see is that many police organizations start to buy half products and then develop them further themselves, because the companies are not really having the right understanding of policing. And that's a pity. Again, I see how criminals are able to make use of these new technologies in a much faster, without constraints. They are able to do it. We are legally bound. Interpol, policing, we are rightfully very strictly controlled.
Mm-hmm.
But that also means we cannot develop that much. We have to apply data protection, etc., which is very, let me underline that, very important.
Sure.
But it makes that we also need to depend more on the developments of the business. But if there's not always a right fit, I'm sometimes a little bit like, oh, we are losing time and energy. We could be so much more effective in fighting crime if law enforcement and business could work a little bit more efficient together.
Got it. Anita, on the Interpol website, there is this extremely comprehensive report that you authored entitled "Towards Responsible AI Innovation." You was with Irakli Berzeh at the United Nations and a Regional Crime and Justice Research Institute who we had on the show several months ago. Artificial intelligence is one of those topics that's so hot nowadays, with everyone and their views out there, from Elon Musk to Bill Gates and down the line, having their views on what the future of this technology is. Could I please have just a couple of minutes of the Anita Hazenberg view on where we're going with artificial intelligence and just some top line thoughts in terms of crime fighting?
I like that you make this link, because I would like to also refer it back to what I just said. I think the example of we, as the Interpol Innovation Center, we started 4 years ago. And even at that time, artificial intelligence was also just starting to become an issue in policing. And we didn't know where to go exactly. And we were also a little bit overwhelmed by how fast the developments went. But we realized that we should never do it on our own. And in that way, it was very good that Interpol, as an international organization, joined strong forces with UNICRI, a United Nations organization, who had a special dedicated office dealing with artificial intelligence. And we organized a first session rather soon together, saying, where is policing in the area of artificial intelligence? And we found out that they were just literally in the first start of, oh my God, this is going to mean something. 4 years later now, everyone in law enforcement is aware that this is going to be a big issue, fundamental changing law enforcement in all dimensions. And what we realized, Irakli and myself, we really picked up quite soon the need for having an, let's call it, toolkit. And that's how we actually are working on it. A toolkit for the trustworthy use of artificial intelligence by law enforcement. Because again, we see a lot of law enforcement organizations not knowing what to do. We see human rights organizations telling, rightfully, be careful, because how much will the privacy of individuals be scrutinized? And we have to bring that all together, because we cannot ignore anymore that artificial intelligence is a big game changer in policing. But we can also not say, let's not use it, because the criminals are using it intensively. And you ask about something, what I see. I was quite worried, and I spoke before about our weekly sessions, these virtual discussion rooms. We organized a few on deepfakes. And what I learned from them was, and I found that quite shocking, is, deepfakes can really influence the way our population, the communities we serve, look at their police organization. Imagine that we have every day negative, deepfakes, false messages about, how policing is treating demonstrators, how policing is reacting to individuals. And these messages are made by people who do not like policing or would like to put policing in a bad perspective. How do you think that we, in the end, can work with the support of our communities? Because that's crucial in policing. Whenever that's digital or it's in real life, we need to be supported by the communities we serve, otherwise we would not be able to do our work properly. So if these societies, communities think that we are a bunch of bastards, mistreating the communities. They don't want to work with us anymore. We lose the trust. And that is fun. So I bring it back to something which is not technology related. But for me, always fundamental trust of a community, in their local police, is the key for success of law enforcement, and for that, the key of success to create safe communities. Mm-hmm. So that is one aspect. Another aspect of deep fakes is that it looks like everything, and if you see in 4 years even, how quickly they can make, for example, fake videos. How can we as police go to judges, to prosecutors, and bring reliable evidence on a crime which has taken place and say to the judge, this is what we think has happened? How can we prove that these videos, the body scans, the cameras we use often in law enforcement to report what is happening? How can we, in the long term and in the short term already, looking at the developments with fake videos, how can we prove to courts that this is reliable evidence? This will demand now action of law enforcement to be prepared. And these are only two aspects of even dimension of artificial intelligence. I'm not even talking about big data.
Sure.
Look at the amounts of data. The worry police chiefs should have is not if you know something. No, the worry is that you have the information in your system, but the data is so massive that you are not able to get it out in time. The terrorist act happens, and then later you have to explain to your authorities that, if we had looked and we had been able to spit in all the data we have, we would have been able to detect that this huge terrorist attack would have had happened or was about to happen. But we were not able to do so because we are not ready to deal with this massive flow of data. Mm-hmm. These are just a few examples how artificial intelligence is really, really going to affect or is already affecting law enforcement.
Anita, what is happening in 2022? Any big news that you can talk about at this point? Conferences you're going to be presenting at? Please take the floor, and if I've missed any topics that we've gone into or not gone into yet, I'll hand it back to you.
Oh, there are many things I would like to share. First, that we would like to present the draft toolkit, as I just said, about the trustworthy use of artificial intelligence together with our partner Unicry. That's a big, but that will only happen probably at the end of the year, because it's a very sensitive process in which we want to consult as many as possible organizations, academics, etc. That's one. But there's one really big project on our agenda, and that is developing a vision of global policing for the future. So we have created a roadmap, which means that we are going to interview, we hope, more than 50 police chiefs all over the world. Not only the chiefs of police, also companies, how they see that policing should change. We would like to speak to professors and other academics and bring this all together in also using consultative sessions in what should be the new vision of policing, especially in a digital world, because we have, policing has always been, the police officer on the street, accessible for the people in a community. How is that working when the people in the community do not see anymore that their law enforcement is consisting of police officers of flesh and blood, which can give them a feeling that they are reliable and trustworthy? How does that work when you sit behind a computer and talk to your police? How are we as law enforcement developing to still be able to create this trustworthy relationship. This is key in whatever I do in policing, whatever I think about innovation. We think about technologies, but in the end, it's about using them in a way that we still are trusted by the societies we serve. And that demands a new vision, because we are not anymore always on the street. We are also behind computers. How do we build that relation? And I have to say that digitalization has been acknowledged by our Innovation Technology Advisory Group of INTERPOL as one of the biggest challenges in law enforcement. Also, the Strato Group, the group of advisors who are doing the Global Horizon scanning, is something they acknowledge that we are sometimes running behind and we have to catch up. And there's something, you spoke about tech gym. Tech gym means technology gym. Because there's another issue. I mean, in my age, I'm 40 years in policing. I'm joined when I was 17. In my generation, we are the non-digital natives. We are running policing. We are the leaders at this moment. It is about the digital native generation who soon will take over. And it's the non-digital generation who is deciding at the moment how policing look for the future generation. But we really do not know. And we sometimes, I recently spoke to a chief of police who I really respect. And he said, Anita, I have to organize tech gym for myself because I have to take decisions about artificial intelligence, about what you said, the use of nano, the use of big data, quantum computer. Do I focus on that or not? Anita, I have no idea. And I have to call in the experts in my organization who deal with it, but also the outsiders who are, really the real experts. And they have to tell me what I have to do in order to prepare my police organization for the future. And I'm not always too much ready. And that's why, as Interpol, we have said in the Innovation Center, we have to organize tech gym. If chiefs want to develop, that's why we organize these training centers, training rooms, in which we hope that we, are able not only to create awareness, but also train senior officers that they are able to make the right decisions to make, tech-proof police organizations ready for the future.
Outstanding. Fascinating journey, Anita. I have one more question for you. This is just a little bit of a wrap up, but you're at the Interpol Innovation Directorate all day, working very hard. You have a long day. You leave the global complex for innovation. You come home to your home in Singapore. You have some dinner. You sit on the couch and relax. You turn on the television. Does Anita Hazenberg ever watch police dramas or crime stories or reality TV focused on crime? Do you watch any of that to relax? Or what do you do to relax when you're not focusing on international crime?
I definitely do not, never, ever look at these programs.
Good.
Because, being a police officer for 40 years, you are so frustrated by the way we are portrayed, which is so far from the daily reality of both a police officer in a police station, where, you don't see in these crime programs how often police officers sit behind their computers, dealing with a lot of administration, which is actually hopefully changing due to technologies. Let's look at that from a positive side. Also in Interpol, as I said before, we don't jump from buildings. We don't, enter houses with arresting orders. No, we also have a lot of administration, a lot of paperwork to fill in, a lot of securities to deal with. No, I'm not sitting. It's not enjoyable. But I have something else. I work globally, and I love to design travels. You know, I love to learn more about other cultures, about other people, how they look at the world, what I can learn from their country. So I don't mind to sit when I come home. I prepare a very nice dinner. I love cooking, and then relax and look at where else in the world is there something I can learn culturally, language-wise. And I enjoy living in this globalized world, living and working for an organization as Interpol, which is serving that global world. And I'm very proud to be a member of that.
Outstanding, outstanding, and it's truly a fascinating story and journey, and it's going to be fun to continue to watch your journey developing, as you say, this new vision for global policing. For everybody that is going to be listening to this particular episode across our podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Anita Hazenberg, Director, Innovation Directorate at Interpol, developing the new vision for global policing. Anita, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us. Thanks for everything that you're doing there and keeping the world safe. And as we say on this show, thank you for helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us. A really fascinating story.